Hello. There's been a lot of bad news over the last couple of weeks that is going to continue, but I thought I would break it up a little bit with some fun stories from E3's past. I was reminiscing a little bit after I did that video a couple of weeks ago about the real reason that E3 died, and talked a little bit about the retail component of E3 and how that disappeared, and that's what actually killed the show. I was reminiscing a little bit about some of my favorite memories from going to E3, because I always loved going to E3. I went for quite a few years, almost a decade, and always had a good time there, schmoozing and playing games and being part of the spectacle of it all. It was a lot of fun, and I thought I would share some stories, some of my kind of memories of E3's past, at least the safer work versions, the ones that I can share without getting yelled at or canceled or whatever. So let me give you a couple. Number one is from E3 2011, and this is a weird one. This was, I believe it was my first E3, and I went to the Nintendo press conference. And for people who don't remember, this is the time of the Wii. The Wii was the hottest thing on the planet. It was selling millions and millions of units everywhere. It was showing up in old age homes. It was breaking into the casual market. Everybody had a Wiimote and was playing tennis and golf and bowling and whatnot. And Nintendo came out, and Reggie Fils-Aimé, the president of Nintendo of America, came out and said, I would like to announce, this is me paraphrasing, I don't remember exactly what he said, but he said, we are announcing Wii U. And then they played this video, and it showed this tablet, and it just kept saying Wii U over and over again. And I remember, I'll never forget this. I was sitting next to my colleague, Keza McDonald, now works for The Guardian, now is the author of the great book, Super Nintendo. And we looked at each other and we were like, is this a new console or a Wii accessory? And just sitting there and watching that and not being clear, even though we were in the audience, I think set the tone for one of the biggest reasons the Wii U failed, which is that nobody actually knew what it was. And we could tell from the get-go, being in that press conference and seeing the confusion. And I remember they let us, there were like VIP wristbands that you could get if you were part of, I guess, what they consider the VIP press. I was working for Wired at the time, and I got a VIP wristband, and I got to go backstage and check out the Wii U. And that's when it became a little bit clearer that this is a brand new console. But at the time, everyone just had no idea. They were like, Wii U? That's a tablet you can buy for your Wii? Like, what is this? Then a year later, another funny Nintendo story at E3 2012. This is a good one. So this was an era, if you don't, so nowadays most games that are made in Japan and have any sort of profile are localized in English. Most games do not just kind of stick in Japan, but back then, and really any period before like the modern era, there were plenty of games that were released in Japan and never actually localized in the US, or outside of Japan, in Europe or anything like that, because the companies involved didn't see it as worth it. They didn't think there was enough of a market for those games. And one series of games at the time that was not all that popular outside of Japan, and this might seem absurd to think about now, but it was Fire Emblem. And so at E3 2012, Fire Emblem Awakening either had just come out or was about to come out for the Nintendo 3DS. And there was a big question about whether it would be localized here in English. Nobody actually knew, and Nintendo hadn't said anything. And I remember Reggie Fils-Aimé was doing this little press conference thing. He was talking to journalists at one of these like little kind of conference rooms. It wasn't a big press conference or anything. It was a smaller kind of behind closed doors thing. I don't remember even what he was talking about. Must have been a presentation about some other 3DS games or something like that. And I remember asking him, this was my first year at Kotaku, so I had been there for about 5 months, and I remember asking Reggie Fils-Aimé, oh, hey, so is Fire Emblem Awakening coming out in North America? And he was just like, yes, we've announced that it's part of our lineup and it'll be out such and such next year, or whatever he said. And me being the young news hound that I was, I remembered that it hadn't actually been announced for the U.S. And so this is a scoop that I got from Reggie Fils-Aimé saying firsthand, "Oh my God, this game is coming to the U.S." And I remember writing it up, tweeting it, yada yada, breaking the news, and then Nintendo, to kind of damage control, had to send out a tweet of their own, being like, "Yes, Fire Emblem Awakening will be coming to the United States. More news on that as it's available," which is a very unorthodox way to announce a game. And it turns out that Reggie just completely by accident announced it in this little press conference because I asked him about it. That was very funny. Um, all right, couple more memories from E3. So E3 2015. There used to be this thing before E3, about a month beforehand or a few weeks before E3 would actually start. There was this event called Judges Week. And so Jeff Keighley, who we now know as the host of the Game Awards and Summer Games Fest, at the time he ran what I believe he called E3 Awards, something like that, where essentially there would be these quote unquote official E3 awards where you could win game of the show or best whatever of the show, and they would have press vote on them, sort of like the Game Awards, except if instead of being about actual games, it was about demos and hype and trailers. E3, I think 2014 was Evolve. I don't remember what all the year's winners were off the top of my head. But what he would do is, so one of the rules was that in order to be eligible for one of these awards, you had to have a playable version of your game. And it a lot of times at E3, what they would have, a lot of these companies would just have kind of hands-off demos where they would just show a trailer or show gameplay footage without actually letting you get your hands on the sticks. But for this award eligibility, you had to be playable. And so what they would do is they would have this event called Judges Week, where they would have a bunch of journalists fly out to LA, usually Santa Monica, and that you would get on a bus and you would be kind of ushered from company to company in their little hotel rooms, where they would have game demos for you to play so you could properly assess the demo and vote on them at E3. I believe this was certainly one of the only years we did this at Kotaku, because we ultimately thought it was so silly and dumb to be giving out awards to E3 demos. So after this, I think we decided not to do it anymore. But this year, E3 2015, I went, and it was a very bizarre experience. It was like this summer camp like thing where you would be going on these buses with all these other journalists and eating sliders at every event, and it was a very surreal experience. I remember they would take us, like we got to go to Konami's office and play Metal Gear Solid for 3 hours. That was actually the coolest thing. 2K had us play Battleborn, if you remember that game, the Gearbox game that died pretty quickly because it came out just when Overwatch did. There were other games too. I remember going to a Warner's thing and we played Arkham Knight and Mad Max. Pretty cool demos of those two games. There's a whole bunch of stuff, but there was one thing in particular that stood out to me because we got taken to this one little hotel room and put in front of these demo stations and told to play this game for a couple hours, and we played it, and it was just so like mid, I guess you would call it these days. That's not the slang we used back then, but it was mediocre. People were not super impressed. People didn't really know what to make of it. We left the demo all just kind of talking to each other and be like, why did we have to waste our time on this? And that company was Epic Games, and the video game was Fortnite. 2015 E3 Judges Week, we all played Fortnite for 2 hours, having no idea what it would eventually turn into. That game, of course, was released 2 years later, and also had kind of like a mediocre reception until Epic Games wound up creating a battle royale mode based on PUBG and added that to the game, and then suddenly it became a cultural phenomenon. So, man, that was a strange time playing Fortnite before anyone had any idea what it would turn into. This was, of course, the I believe what's called Save the World mode later, where it was kind of like Minecraft meets Left 4 Dead, and it was just a very strange experience. Another memory, by the way, this is not really a story, but just kind of a weird memory. Some people might remember that E3 used to have what were called booth babes, which were these conventionally attractive women, oftentimes in skimpy clothing, dressed up, who would just be there to kind of appeal to the crowd, I suppose, and bring people into the booths and the showcases and whatnot. One year, I remember at Nintendo's booth, they had demos for 3DS games, but for whatever reason, they decided that the 3DSs themselves had to be attached and on the necks of women models that they had hired to work the E3 booth. So in order to demo like the new Kirby game or the new Paper Mario, you had to play it holding a 3DS that was attached to a woman who just had to kind of stand there awkwardly watching as you played a 3DS game about 5 feet away from her. Just another bizarre experience of attending E3. One more story, and then I'll read a fun email that I found, or at least paraphrase a fun email that I found. This story is from E3 2019. So this was the last E3. Also a Nintendo story, because Nintendo was just the most fun company to cover at these things. They would always bring all their Japanese developers out and you get to talk to them. It was pretty much the only time you got to talk to a lot of these developers like Miyamoto and Aonuma and Sakurai and all these other people who were just legendary developers. So it was always a lot of fun to do the Nintendo thing at E3, which reminds me that like in that previous video that I did, the real reason that E3 died, I talked about how there's this kind of misconception that Nintendo going to Nintendo Directs is what killed E3, when really Nintendo was a massive presence at E3 and one of the key reasons for a lot of people to go. Anyway, so it's E3 2019. One of the things Nintendo used to do is they would actually gather some trusted press people and allow them to watch early versions of the Nintendo Direct. So they would have you come in, you'd agree to the embargo, and you could prepare your coverage. So you could watch the Nintendo Direct, take notes, and then prepare so you can write articles in advance, and it would just make things easier for you. You could get everything right. You could make sure you had everything good to go, and you didn't have to just like move quickly and potentially make mistakes. So if they had a direct where they announced, I don't know, Metroid Prime 4 or like a new Mario game or something, you could have a story ready to go, and it just made things way easier. It was a big boon. It was, we appreciated it very much when they did that. And so they did that in E3 2019. They gathered a bunch of press people in this little theater at the LA Convention Center. We all sat there. We watched the Direct. It was great. And then we went back and got to write it up and stuff. And so the way things worked at Kotaku at the time is we would have this process for doing the news of the show, because at Kotaku, we were a pretty high volume gaming blog. We wanted to cover as much news as possible, especially the interesting stuff. And the way it worked is I was the news editor, so I would oversee the shift of people, and I would be like, okay, this is coming up, you writer take this, okay, you take this, you take that, you take this, and I would tell people what to do and how to cover it, and I would just kind of like oversee the whole process. And so in the case of the Nintendo Direct, where I had actually watched it, I could just prepare people in advance and be like, okay, this is what's coming, all right, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. So we got through the end of this Nintendo Direct, and it was coming to an end, and I was like, all right, that's it. Closed my laptop, got ready to head to the show floor, because the E3 actual convention was about to open, and I had to go there and take appointments and whatnot. Closed my laptop. Suddenly, I think I was sitting with Kirk Hamilton, my colleague at the time, now my co-host at Triple Click. He was like, hey, there's something else. I was like, what do you mean there's something else? He's like, people in Slack are saying there's something else. And I open up my laptop to catch the very end of them teasing a sequel to Breath of the Wild, which at the time they just called the sequel to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which they had not put in the version of the Nintendo Direct that they showed us early, that they had just kept as a surprise for everybody on the actual live stream that they put online, which completely threw us off. We had to scramble to get up a story, because I was telling people, oh, it's over, we're done, we're done, you don't have to worry about it anymore. I was freaking out. It threw a wrench into all of our plans that morning. Almost wish that we hadn't gotten to see it in advance, because then I would have been just kind of expecting new stuff all the time, wouldn't have known when it was supposed to end. But instead, I thought it was going to end and tuned out early, missed that, and it was just a bit of a mess. But hey, we got Tears of the Kingdom out of it, so that's pretty cool. One more thing I'll share, one more fun story, which I found in my inbox. I was doing a little bit of digging and found this that I'm gonna read this email. This is from several years ago. Hi, Jason. We'd like to offer you and Kotaku the exclusive on some awesome E3 news from Arby's, a brand known for its gamer focused social media channels. Blah, 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 blah. Each day of the expo, Arby's will be building and hiding 2 to 3 cardboard creations based on some of the games that will be announced at E3 around the convention area for attendees to find. Arby's official Twitter account will then tweet out a cryptic photo of each creation that will include visual clues and suggestive copy about where in the convention area fans might be able to find the artwork. The coolest part, lucky fans who find an Arby's creation will not only get to keep the art, but they will also find a slip attached that contains Arby's gift cards and a handwritten note that reveals the real surprise. This creation is actually a golden ticket that will grant the lucky fan a unique experience inside of E3, such as jump the line for demos, closed door videos, a swag bag, yada, yada, yada. We'd like to announce the Arby's E3 Art Drop campaign on Friday, June 9th. Please let me know if you're interested in the exclusive. I was not interested in the exclusive. We turned that one down, but that is the type of thing that happened at E3, especially when they opened it up to the public and things got pretty ridiculous. Man, that doesn't happen at Summer Game Fest. No Arby's golden ticket promotions at Summer Game Fest, but maybe that's for the best. It's like it's for the best and for the worst. I do, as I said before, I miss the spectacle of E3, and Arby's is one of those things that comes with it. Anyway, hope you enjoyed a little bit of reminiscing. Hopefully this breaks up a little bit of the horrible news that has come and is coming. But yeah, man, who among us does not miss E3 for one reason or another? I certainly do. All right, I'll see you all next time.